The following video contains spoilers for the Mystery House Crafters event, which isn't officially translated. Discretion is advised. In the town of Aal, a Dutch painter works on his artwork, which would later become lauded as masterpieces throughout the ages, at the cost of his mental health. In the plains of Greece, a heartbroken water nymph stares longingly at the sun, lamenting over the gods, her form slowly changing. But whose memories are these? And who am I? A small girl floating adrift on the reverse side of the world asks these questions. The girl only knows herself by one name. Today we cover a tale of the discovery of identity and self-actualization. This is the tale of Van Gogh. Vincent van Gogh was a struggling Dutch artist, creating works within the south of France, until he composed De Sterrennacht, arguably his most famous piece, which allowed him to gaze into the abyss himself. Upon the completion of The Starry Night, Van Gogh had invited eldritch deities into his world. After this revelation, Vincent took his own life, hoping that their machinations would end with his death. However, his soul did not find peace in the end, for it was forcibly ripped out and fashioned into a patchwork entity, awakening to his memories in the form of a young girl whose biology was not quite human, and placed in the class of foreigner. Van Gogh found herself wandering in imaginary number space, an unobservable domain on the reverse side of the world, unable to interact with reality, until eventually she found the Nautilus, a submarine currently operated by the Chaldea Security Organization, manned by Captain Nemo. Being put under observation by Chaldea, Van Gogh began to recollect her memories. Wait, recollect her memories? But Vincent van Gogh was definitely a man, and how is it that she was able to navigate the sea of imaginary numbers in the first place? These questions brought forth by Chaldea were met with no answers from Van Gogh, the state of confusion having struck Gogh herself, being given a strange double phantasm and a mysterious class. Who was she really? During a date with the master of Chaldea, her cluttered memories began to conflict with her identity once more, and her manic tendencies had begun to concern the crew of the Nautilus, the master being pulled aside and confronted by Nemo, sympathizing as a patchwork creation himself, that being the amalgamation of Captain Nemo and Triton, son of Poseidon. However, the longer the crew spent within the fathoms of the imaginary sea, the more it began to take its toll on their minds. Trapped in a submarine with no foreseeable way out, being assaulted by unknown entities, foreign elements within their midst, the seeds of chaos were blooming within the Nautilus, and for an entity like Van Gogh, it proved too much. So, she resorted to familiar bad habits, gnawing on her arms as a result of not being enough, not contributing enough to pull her weight on the ship, and letting everyone else around her down, thinking she was better off dead, so that everyone else would finally have peace. The mind of a tortured artist weighed heavy on her, but she received comfort from her composite kindred, Captain Nemo. The prospects of survival began to diminish as the Nautilus suffered further onslaughts and waded deeper into unknown territory. The captain's mind began to feel exhausted. Van Gogh, wanting to treasure her new friendship, took it upon herself to help, making a bad decision in the process. Using her nature as a foreigner, she decided to eliminate the threats to the ship, starting with herself. Trapping herself in the cargo hold, she began to self-harm, the blood seeping out, creating eldritch creatures in its wake, to the horror of Captain Nemo. After subduing Van Gogh for her own protection, the cause of disarray on the ship is found. Katsushika Hokusai, a fellow foreigner, disguised as one of the crew and having been called from within the depths of the imaginary sea by an unknown voice. She was an element of chaos that had to be stopped. With Hokusai restrained, the climax was approaching, and was kicked off by the meeting of two great artists from the east and the west. Upon their encounter, Hokusai insisted that Vincent van Gogh was a man, and the body that stood before her could not have been him. The body that stood before them was in fact Clytie. 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 An ominous air washed over the ship as the truth was revealed. Clytie, a water nymph from Greek mythology, a lover of Apollo, god of the sun, who was heartbroken as he left her for another. Yet her love never faded as she gazed into the sun until one day she simply became a flower. The plan of those eldritch deities, the outer gods, had come to light. They had attached the spirit of Van Gogh to that of Clytie, Vincent van Gogh, a man who would surely end his life to stop their plans, and Clytie, the nymph whose love for the sun allowed her to never die. They had plotted to amass their forces by using Chaldea's foreigners and Van Gogh's artistry to enhance their powers. Upon this final revelation, Van Gogh, the result of an evil machination, flees. For the sake of the friends she had made on this brief voyage, she chooses to die, alone in the bottom of the void sea. And so she dissipates into the sea, deeper and deeper, further and further. She sent the call out because she was lonely. She laments on her two halves being opposed, wanting to die yet wanting to live, and sinks deeper and deeper, further and further. It'll be okay if she just dies here. She can't hurt anyone anymore. She will simply drift till time stands still, sinking deeper and deeper, further and further. Shallower, shallower! Higher, higher! What? As if the forces of Chaldea would simply abandon an ally. They call out to her in the darkness while she sinks into her assigned role. She should do what she's made for. That was her purpose, after all. A voice reverberates through the imaginary sea, a question projected by a familiar voice. Through the waves, the query reaches the ears of the one who floats. Your name. What is your name? Identify yourself. Nemo, captain of the Nautilus, asks her this. The patchwork spirit adrift has a choice. Her name. What is it? Who is she? A paradoxical being she may be, but she is still herself, and it is her right to choose. So she declares her name. She is Clytie. Clytie Van Gogh. Puppet of the gods no longer. She is her own person, with her own desires. And with the forces of Chaldea, they put an end to the wicked plot of the outer gods, and the ephemeral voyage comes to an end. However, this is not the end of her journey, but simply the beginning. Her identity is not entirely solidified just yet. She accepts her two halves as one whole. However, each piece comes with its lasting regrets. In Clytie Van Gogh's case, this is twofold. Vincent's thoughts regarding his younger brother, Theodorus Van Gogh, his closest companion in life, and Clytie's rueful thoughts on Apollo, her undying love for the god that had left her forlorn. As fate would have it, there would come a time when she was able to confront both of these insecurities, in the most unlikely of situations, through the medium of Minecraft. Her stage was set during the Mystery House Crafter's singularity. Equipped with a new Saint Graph, now a member of the Lancer class, due to her obsession with Artoria craft, replacing her madness with newfound enthusiasm and a fondness for puns, she set off to investigate the home nail war. However, despite her new saint graph, she was still unsure of herself, wanting to hold loftier dreams in order to not disappoint the ones that both of her parts had left behind. Throughout the Singularity, Go serves as an inspiration for the participants of the home nail war, serving as their guiding light, like Chaldea once did on her maiden voyage, extending a hand to Comun, a pharaoh who tries to bear the burdens of others alone, like she once did. With all the combatants aligned, it was time to confront the mastermind of this singularity, one who had gone to such an extent to conceal their identity throughout. But how could Van Gogh possibly acknowledge one who rejected their whole life? The one who orchestrated this entire sequence of events was none other than Theo Van Gogh, Vincent's little brother, a man filled with frustration at the legacy Van Gogh had left behind. His wish for the Grail was to erase the artwork of Vincent van Gogh, and if he had the means, to eradicate Van Gogh from history entirely, going on to further vent out his anger towards his brother, enraged at how Chaldea could stand such a being, the final nail in the coffin being the summoning of Apollo, Clytie's lost lover. Seeing this as a chance to erase his past failings, he joins Theo's side. With the revelation of her brother's animosity, Van Gogh enters a depressive mood. However, the pharaoh is there to remove her from the pits of despair. Van Gogh, having inspired him throughout the Singularity, launches an attack on Theo. However, whilst on his last legs, using his connection to the deities of the sun, Theo snatches the pharaoh's body and escapes. Van Gogh goes through a series of her brother's resentments, his dismay at Van Gogh breaking their contract, and the formulation of his plan, and is eventually placed into darkness, reflecting on Van Gogh's shining light, Theo, and Clytie's shining light, Apollo, and how they were both driven away. She enters Cafeteras by Nacht, her internal starry night, with a remnant of Teuton by her side, telling her that despite her light having faded, she can reignite it and become her own light in the dark. But to become this, she needs to face her past in order to look at a brighter tomorrow. So using the heart of the pharaoh, she resummons the god of the sun. The star that Clytie stared at for eternity till she became a flower appears before her, and finally, she turns her gaze. She will venture into the abyss to become someone else's light, to save the master and Chaldea. The final confrontation begins, stripped away from all the magic and mazes in this singularity. This is a duel for brotherhood, and as an older sibling, she must take care of her little brother. Clytie Van Gogh is no longer held down by the sins of the past. Instead, she is a beacon of light that shines towards the future. Theo's grievances are his own. He deluded himself into the madness he is now plagued with. It's sad that their brief meeting had to turn out this way, but Go is truly happy she got to see Theo again. So when she wins the duel, she offers her hand, a handshake, for Theodorus Van Gogh. And with that, a finished piece is produced. But who does this final portrait paint a picture of? Clytie Van Gogh, a girl lost in the midst of an imaginary sea, shown a ray of light by Chaldea and the Nautilus, a patchwork spirit who was granted an identity, internalizing Chaldea's shining light and becoming a candle in the dark, rallying together mighty heroes under her radiant beacon. Viewers, the picture we see before us is a self-actualized artist, part-time miner, who bears the body of a nymph, no longer consumed by a maddening contradiction, but holding a newfound strength to confront the darkness and lighting that path for others. That is the essence of Clytie Van Gogh. In the most unlikely of situations, through the medium of Minecraft.